Here we go. Hey everyone, welcome back to the iGaming experience. I'm your host, Sam Bhatti, coming to you as usual from the beautiful Zebra Studios here in Podgorica, Montenegro. And today we are going to walk through something that I think a lot of people coming into iGaming wonder about, especially if they come from the startup or e commerce world. We're going to compare what it's like to launch an iGaming brand versus launching a typical online store. I feel like that's a place that people can relate to and understand. Maybe you've done one yourself, or everyone maybe knows someone that started an online store, an online brand. And so I just want to give a little bit of an idea of what those differences are. And look, I've worked in tech and marketing for years. I've had former colleagues react to me now being fully in iGaming by saying something along the lines of, hey, isn't setting up a sports book or an online casino like basically the same thing as setting up a Squarespace or a Shopify store? And the answer is no, it's not. It's not even close. Okay, so in this episode, I'm going to break it down step by step. What's similar, what's completely different, and why launching an iGaming brand isn't just about putting up a website and buying some ads. We'll also get into the importance of having people on your team who actually know the local market you're targeting, because that part, it's everything. Okay, so let's get into it. All right, so let's start with how people think this works. In e-commerce, it's super common to hear stories like, I built my store in a weekend, dropped a few hundred to a grand on IG ads, and made my first sale within 24 hours, by Monday. So that kind of move fast energy, in a way, I think has shaped a whole generation of founders, and especially the way they think about launching something online. And I'm not bashing them for that. In fact, fair enough. In some cases, it works. In e commerce, you can test and iterate fast. If your product flops, you can move on. You still have the infrastructure. If your ad campaign doesn't convert, you can adjust, try again, A B test. No license to deal with, no regulator to deal with, not a lot of real friction to deal with at the end of the day. Now, try bringing that approach into iGaming. It's a different game entirely. You're dealing with, first of all, a lot more third parties. You're in a highly regulated environment. You've got a much more complex infrastructure. You've got banking to worry about. You got compliance to worry about, responsible gaming, all layered on top of each other. So we're not talking about a weekend project here. This is a serious build. All right, let's compare the steps side by side. I think this will make it a little bit easier. So, step one, you're looking at the business model. In e commerce, the model is simple: find or create a product, sell it for more than it costs, then scale, increase your margin. In iGaming, you're working with GGR. Remember episode two? That stands for gross gaming revenue, which is the amount of players wager minus what they win. Pretty simple equation there, right? They bet $100 and they win 20 from that $100 bet. So the house gets to keep $80. Their GGR is $80. Simple. Now, with these players, with your iGaming players, you don't just sell something once. Players come back. They deposit again. They win. They lose. They bet again. It's recurring, hopefully. If you've done well on retention, then you should have that occurring with several of your players. But that being said, it's also extremely volatile, right? People can lose all of their money, or they can have other interests or find a different platform, and that loyal customer that you had is gone. right? And then your profits aren't treated quite the same as they would be within e-commerce, right? It gets split many ways between you, your platform provider, the game studios take a cut, the payment processors take a cut, affiliates. So like your slice of the pie depends a lot on how smartly you structure your deals. Then you've also got payments in iGaming, which is a full-time job, right? You have a whole team that has to deal with these things. In e-commerce, not really the case. You can plug in Stripe, PayPal, or in some cases, just a crypto wallet, and it can be done, right? In iGaming, you need multiple PSPs, you need KYC verification, you need to do anti-fraud checks, um, adding crypto wallets, and everything has to be compliant. It has to be secure, it has to be fast, it has to be reliable. So step two now, that was step one. Let's move to step two, which is licensing, because this is a huge deal and a major separator. This is where a lot of first-time operators even hit a wall if you've not thought about compliance until later on in the game, right? In e-commerce, you register your company, you go live. In iGaming, you need a license. You literally can't legally operate without one. And if you're thinking you can, well, just remember the third parties I've just mentioned and been talking about for this entire podcast series, really. All those third parties are going to want to see your license before working with you. That license might come from Malta, might come from Curacao, Anjouan, Isle of Man, get a local state license or a province, depending on your market. And then getting that license is not that straightforward. There's paperwork, there's background checks, there's proof of funds. Sometimes there's an audit involved. If you have multiple UBOs, which is I believe UBO stands for ultimate beneficial owner. The U I could have wrong there, but essentially it just means who's the person at the top of the pyramid, who actually owns this company. And if you've got multiple people owning a large percentage of it, then it makes those checks even more laborious. So it's doable for sure, right? It just takes time, and you need to know what you're signing up for, right? So that's licensing. Step three, building the actual platform, right? And here's where it gets proper techie, right? In e-commerce, you can use Shopify, you can do a WordPress site and throw in WooCommerce. You can use a Squarespace site, and in those cases, you basically just pick a theme, you pick a product, upload some photos and a description, and start selling. In iGaming, you need a player account management system, right? Also known as a PAM. You need a bonus engine. You need wallet management. Again, like anti-fraud tools, RG tools. Remember what RG was from a previous episode? That's responsible gaming tools. You need integration with content providers like game studios and aggregators and sports books. So, like, unless you're building from scratch, which is expensive and takes at least a year or more, and also requires a incredibly highly skilled team with iGaming experience, most likely you'll be looking at either a white label or a turnkey platform. And if you're not sure what the difference is, really quick, white label means that someone else is holding the license. Usually the platform provider is holding the license and handles the operations, right? You're just putting your brand on top. Turnkey means the infrastructure is pre-built, but you need to run things under your own license, and you take pretty much full operational control, or for the most part, operational control. And in fact, I shouldn't even be explaining this, because I have an episode recently where I went into detail on white label and turnkey solutions, and it's conveniently called white label versus turnkey. So if you're weighing those two options, check that one out after you've finished listening to this episode. Now, just a quick reality check. This episode, as much as I wish it would be enough, it isn't going to be enough to go out and build your own platform from scratch. All right, that takes serious capital, tech resources, licensing experience, etc. But if you're out there evaluating providers, right, whether it's white label or turnkey, this should give you a much clearer lens to see what you're actually buying and which partners might be the right fit for your vision. Right? It's a complicated decision, and honestly, it's coming from a tech guy, so obviously there's some bias, but choosing the right tech stack is one of the most important decisions you'll make. I would argue the most important, but I don't want to be flooded with messages from people from other departments who think that they're more important. But hey, we're all important here. But let me focus on the tech for a moment. So I'm just giving you context here. The more context you have, the better. I have a close friend, right, as an example, that chose his platform not based on the technology and the features, but on personal relationships. Right? He was sold verbally and through some pitch decks a lovely looking platform. He didn't even see the tech before buying it, not live. Now, him and I speak probably once a week or once every 2 or 3 weeks about how much he regrets making a call like that without seeing what else was out there and without properly vetting what was in front of him. So just be aware that not all technology is created equal. And you might be surprised at how many bugs and issues often have to be ironed out, even by the top tier one providers. As I said, these are complex systems. This isn't a knock on any of those tech teams. It's just, this is the reality. This is where we're at in 2025, is there is no set it and forget it solution for iGaming platforms. Okay, so that's your tech. So step 4 now would be on going live. So in e-commerce, once your products are loaded and your checkout works, you hit publish. Now, in iGaming, going live is, let's say, more layered, much more layered. You need final approval, first of all, from your licensing body, right, where they're going to inspect your site, make sure it meets all their requirements. And if it doesn't, you're not going live. They're going to go right back to you with a list of changes. You also have to do full QA on games and sportsbook integration. And quick aside, QA stands for quality assurance, by the way. Again, this is a podcast for beginners, so I'm going to stop and explain these little things along the way. Then there's testing deposits and withdrawals on all your payment methods, right? So you've got several things to worry about here, and we're not even done. You still got to make sure your affiliate tracking is on point and working as it should, right? You got to make sure you're compliant with advertising laws in every market that you want to target. So testing the reporting tools is another task. Testing the bonuses, testing gamification tools, right? It's tests on tests on tests, pre-launch, right? And one delay in one area, and your launch gets pushed. That's it. It's just not plug and play. I wish it was. So that's your little section on launch there, right? But let's move on to step 5, which is marketing and player acquisition. Now, this part is a bit where the two worlds feel a bit closer, right? iGaming and e-commerce, right? Both rely on traffic, right? They need good SEO. Both use affiliates, influencers. They use paid media, organic media. But in iGaming, the big difference here is that affiliates are much more dominant than they are in most parts of e-commerce, especially in more mature iGaming markets, like say in the UK. I'd say that the general number that gets thrown around the industry is affiliates account for 70% of traffic on an iGaming platform. And that's, from what I've been hearing lately, on the lower end. In some cases, it's even in the high 90s, right? You've got some sites that just will do no paid advertising or even organic advertising. They just rely 100% on affiliates. And every now and then they get a little trickle through of some organic traffic, but it's accidental. It's not planned. And the advertising has to be nuanced, right? You can't just say, "Hey, like, sign up with us and win big today," or just like show ads with people being showered in cash. It's first of all, most of your customers are more sophisticated than that. But there's also real advertising rules, such as like age restrictions, responsible gambling messaging, the accuracy of your claims. Like you can't be misleading at all in any way. And then that's if the channels even allow you to advertise for a gambling platform, right? Which is in many cases just a blanket no. You just cannot advertise on certain channels. That's it. So, while the core idea of marketing is the same in both industries, like know your audience and craft your offer and optimize performance, the restrictions and the cost are just worlds apart. So, something to be really aware of because um, a lot of new operators, I think, are of the impression that if you build it, they will come. A little throwback to Field of Dreams, if you ever watched that movie. But that's not, it's just not the case, right? You can build it, you can have a killer platform, but if no one hears about it, no one's coming to it, right? So, really, you got to consider your marketing and the limitations that you're going to have from that, right? Uh, and in fact, that leads me to another section here, which is something I really want to underscore, is having local market knowledge. Right? It's just such a massive point. In fact, I'd say after having functioning technology, this is the biggest factor in whether or not your brand is successful. Right? You need to know your market. You need to know your customer. In e-commerce, like you can target pretty much any country. You can translate your store to the appropriate language, maybe choose the right local currency, and you're good to go. Right? It might not be perfect, but it works. Right? In iGaming, that's literally just scratching the surface. Right? Every market has different preferences, payment methods, content expectations, and most importantly, as I've been drilling in here, regulatory rules. What works in Canada will likely flop in Brazil. Right? What players expect in Germany is totally different from what works in India. I don't think that'll be a surprise to many of you. So I'll give you a very small example that should show you how deep this rabbit hole can go. Right? And this is a tiny one, but like in Australia, slots are called pokies. Right? Aussies, by the way, as an aside, they are the best at naming things. I have to say, they just toss on a fun little suffix onto so many words. Like um, getting your car registration in Australia is called getting your rego. Just toss a little O on the end. And you see it in local in fact, this ties in. You see it in local advertising. So unless you're there or you're from there, it would be hard to know pokies or rego or other idiosyncrasies or local idioms, um, and 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 then how to use those to your advantage, right? Like knowing them is one thing, and then what do you do with them? That's why hiring local market experts is critical, right? You don't want someone who just speaks the language that your platform is translated into. You want someone who understands player behavior. They understand traffic sources, the cultural nuances within that market, what's normal for payment, and then of course, what legal limits do you have for all of these to reach out to this audience, right? Like another example, if you want to scale in LATAM, right, which is not just in iGaming, but in a lot of industries, LATAM stands for Latin America. Um, so if you want to scale there, right, you're going to hire someone in who knows the Brazilian market and how Brazilian players deposit, right? Like a great example is Brazil, along with a few other countries, they have an identification number for their citizens. So in Brazil, I believe it's called a CPF. I think Finland has a similar one, and there's several countries, and that number can be used to auto-populate forms and to streamline the KYC process, right? So essentially taking some of the annoying bits of signing up for to anything, but to a new gambling platform. It just eliminates some of those pain points. If you've got an iGaming site in Brazil and you don't have a CPF option on the registration form, you're dead. Like once they hit that form and see they have to fill out everything manually, nah, they're done. In many cases, like in Canada, right, in another country in Canada, there isn't a number like that, and they expect to have to fill out everything themselves. So, and honestly, I've heard about maybe not too many, two or three brands that I'm familiar with, people that I knew operating it, that failed purely because they assumed the same marketing and the platform setup would work across markets. Right? They had success in one area, they thought, great, let's apply it elsewhere, and they also didn't scale wisely, amongst a couple of other things. But it was one of the major issues that led to their failure, was just not understanding that there's nuances to each one of these markets, right? Okay, so just to wrap this up a little bit, let's have a little quick fire comparison here. So, which is easier, right? E-commerce or iGaming? I have a feeling, if you've been listening, that you're going to be able to answer that really easily, right? The truth is, launching an online store is faster, it's cheaper, it's like incredibly beginner friendly. In fact, I should give Shopify a shout out because they're from my hometown of Ottawa. They got a big old headquarter building in Ottawa, which even though Ottawa is Canada's capital, stuff like that is exciting for us. So shout out Shopify for still being based there. Okay, so I digress as usual. So e-commerce, low barriers to entry, fairly simple. Now iGaming, it's slower to launch, it's way more expensive to set up and run, and it's heavily regulated. But if you get it right, it's got incredibly serious long-term potential, right? There's higher player values, there's stickier users. You get someone on there, they might never want to leave if they're happy with the way you've treated them and the product that you're offering. And then, depending on the market, there's also really strong LTVs, which means the lifetime value of the player or the customer once you get them on your site. So a well-run iGaming brand can grow super fast and be super profitable, but only if you've got the right people around you. All right, I will 100% die on that hill. Even as a tech guy, the tech will only take you so far, right? You need a legal team, tech team, marketing team, risk management team, compliance team. iGaming is a team sport, just straight up, right? Lone wolves just don't do well, right? This isn't tennis, and I guess even tennis, they have a team as well. They're the ones out on the court performing, but you can't do this by yourself. It's just not the way that technology or this industry is set up. So if you're thinking of coming from e-commerce and jumping into iGaming, just know it's not the same game. But if you've got the patience, the funding, and the right partners, it can be incredibly profitable and incredibly rewarding. So don't be scared. I'm not trying to scare anyone off from this. I'm trying to just make it realistic so that you understand what you're getting into, that you do your research, and that hopefully by listening to this, you're going to be better prepared for getting yourself going, right? And those are my major points. So when I set out to do this episode, it wasn't necessarily thinking, all right, let me speak to the e-commerce people out there. I just felt like that was a nice, clean comparison that was relatable, and I think I've succeeded here. I think I've managed to illustrate the differences and the challenges between the two. So, that's basically it for today's episode of the iGaming experience. If this gave you some clarity or made you realize just how much goes into setting up a successful iGaming brand, then do me a favor and share this with someone who's thinking about launching their own brand. And again, I know I keep saying it, but this episode isn't a complete how-to guide. You can't walk away from this and go launch a fully licensed operational iGaming brand tomorrow. But Now, when you're out there having conversations with potential tech providers or marketers or license partners, you'll be way more prepared to ask the right questions. Okay? And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show. We've got way more episodes coming up. We're going to be talking affiliate deal structures. We're going to be talking about how to evaluate game providers, what a good bonus engine actually looks like under the hood, all these things and more. So it's an iGaming bonanza. Stay tuned. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm Sam Bhatti, coming to you from the Zebra Studios in Podgorica, Montenegro, and I will catch you in the next one.